I've sat there with a gun in my hand. I put the barrel in my mouth before and said, this is it. And as a departing gift, I was given a prescription to Vicodin. Lo and behold, a cop pulls right behind me and pulls me over. And I handed him my license and I said, I have no license, I have no registration, and I have no insurance, and I have a handful of warrants out for my arrest. My name is Eric Fredrickson. I was born April 21st, 1982 in San Jose, California. I was raised in a home that was very religious, and it didn't sit well with me at a young age. And at the age of 10, my family packed up and moved from the Bay Area of California to Utah. I didn't fit in very well in the move, began to kind of irritate me in some ways, and by the age of 13, I was basically rebelling against everything. I would like to say there was some traumatic event. There was living situation with the family wasn't good. It's just not the case, though. I was raised in a good family. There was no drugs, there was no alcohol, no violence, none of that in the home ever. But there was just this discontent that existed inside of me. I began to try and fit in with the cool kids, or what I thought were the cool kids. And in my mind, the cool kids were partying, rebelling. And I began just smoking a little weed, drinking a little bit, and it picked up speed immediately. As soon as it got in me, I liked it and I wanted more. Shortly thereafter, about the age of 14, I remember I had a horrible tooth pain one night and went in, actually had a root canal, and he operated on a little bit, but the pain was still intense. I actually had an exposed nerve. I had a big football game the next day as well, and as a departing gift, I was given a prescription to Vicodin. Now at the time I'm 14, this is late, so this would have been about 96, and this was right at the onset of the opioid epidemic. There wasn't a lot known about painkillers. There wasn't a lot known about addiction. It wasn't talked about that much. And basically all that was said was, here are these, kind of be careful with taking them. In my mind, they may as well have been Tylenol or ibuprofen, and kind of my parents too. It was just like, I'm in pain, take these, it'll get rid of the pain. It's a little bit more of an intense painkiller. Took them as prescribed, played in the game the next day with a whole bunch of pain. We didn't win, but with the smoking weed and the drinking and now some painkillers, they sat in the cabinet, and I started to hear whispers around the high school about the effects of getting high on painkillers, on opiates. And it just began an internal conversation of, I think I have some of those in the cabinet at home. I ought to try that. And I did one night, and I intentionally went home and grabbed some out of the cabinet and took them, and there began a whole new chemical romance with painkillers. And high school was a chaotic blur, to say the least. Lots of drinking, lots of drugs. How I graduated with a 3.0 GPA to this day, I don't even know how that happened. But I did, played sports, was a very good athlete. But just kind of wandered through high school like a blurry maze, to be honest. And right after high school was done, immediately it just really picked up speed. I started to see a lot of friends dying, a lot of friends. There was a few in high school who passed away from freak accidents, all involving drugs, alcohol, from suicide, overdose, all sorts of different things. But when high school ended, it picked up speed big time. And that was also the onset of Purdue Pharma unleashing hell on America through OxyContin. And I sunk right into that. It was nonstop drinking and drugs and pills, and went to my first rehab and hospital visits. I remember waking up in the hospital not even knowing how I got there. from drinking. They had to tell me what happened and what they were fixing on me and how I even got there. It was normal in my life and absolute chaos. And one thing that I've recognized over the years of my own journey and working with so many people is very often, especially back then, still some now, is that oftentimes, most of the time, the hooks of addiction get set in someone's life, and they almost don't even realize this happened. They're a young age, they're smoking weed, they're drinking, maybe it's a prescription they were given, and before they even realize that the hooks are in and now they have to deal with this demon of addiction, they were just having fun. They were just trying to fit in. They were just trying to escape the internal pain they were in. They were just trying to find something to numb the trauma they've been through, so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, now they're dealing with the demon of addiction that's got its grip tight on them. And that's absolutely what happened to me at that time. And it was years. I went to my first treatment center when I was 21. Was actually doing pretty good. About halfway or so through my stay there, which was many months, it was a long program, I didn't want to talk about what was going on inside anymore. I just ran out the door one day. I was high that night, totaled my car in a blackout about 2 weeks later. That was the age of 21. That chaos continued for 5 more years. Suicide attempt, overdose, waking up in jail, not knowing how I got there, waking up in the hospital, not knowing how I got there, broken relationships, just health, chaos, violence, just the madness. Just it's such madness that the hooks get in and you don't even, all of a sudden you're just not even yourself and you have no control over your life. And it's a depressed, desperate, chaotic, fear-filled, anxiety-filled place to exist. I'm responsible for all my own actions, but in going through it and coming out the other side and working with many people now, I can say I understand. I get it when someone's in the middle of it, going through what it is they're going through. Their actions are not excused, but I understand how it's just very difficult to get out of the cycle and the pattern and the grip of it. It was the age of 26. I had been running from everything and everyone. I had this thing in my mind, well, if I just run away, if I just go to a new city, my problems won't follow me. Obviously that doesn't work. And I was in a small little town in southern Utah, hiding from the world. And I didn't really have any more bridges to burn. I didn't have any more resources. I didn't have any more energy. My external circumstances had been worse many times, many different times, way worse. But internally, it had never been worse. Actually wasn't even I had multiple warrants out for my arrest, but it wasn't because I got arrested and then was thinking. I was just at a real low, depressed, and I had nothing left inside of me. So I called my parents and I said, you guys help me get into a treatment center. And anytime I was serious about wanting to change, they were willing to help. And they recognized that I was. And so I packed up all my belongings, and my parents lived 2 hours away from me, north. And I packed up everything in my car and I drove back to their house with no license, no registration, and no insurance, and a handful of warrants out for my arrest. And I drove the whole way there, and I get off the freeway, and I thought to myself, I knew the roads on that county very, very well because I had driven on them not wanting to be seen by cops for many years. And so I immediately got off the freeway and pulled onto the back streets, and lo and behold, a cop pulls right behind me and pulls me over. And I remember thinking immediately as soon as the cop pulled me over, like, man, I'm done. Like, I'm just going to tell him I'm done. Like, I'm so tired of all of this. And I had my license in my hand, and he comes up to the window. I handed him my license, and I said, I have no license, I have no registration, and I have no insurance, and I have a handful of warrants out for my arrest. And he looked at me almost like it was a relief. Like, wow, someone's actually being honest with me. Immediately another squad car pulled up, and I remember I sat there in the car and I prayed. I'd had some encounters with God when I was young. It wasn't that I ever questioned if God was real, but I had no understanding of who God was. I had no theology. I knew deep down God was the answer. God was the way out of this. But if you would have asked me to explain who I thought God was or how I formulated my opinion on all of that, I had no idea. Other than, I think God will help me. I know He's real, and I'm pretty sure He's the way out. I sat there in my car and I prayed. It was an internal prayer. I didn't even say it audibly, and it was very simple, and it was just something like this: God, I'm done, I need help. That was it. It wasn't the length or the eloquence of my prayer, certainly, that got God's attention, but I believe it was the honesty. Immediately, so I go to jail. It's Friday night. Anyone that's in recovery and has dealt with the legal system, you don't see the judge till Monday morning. So I sit in jail all weekend, and I see the judge on Monday morning. The judge says, so you got two options. One, we let you go right now and back into the system, probation, intensive outpatient, start paying all your fines and these new charges you got and all that. The judge says, or you can go to jail for 2 weeks and I'll wipe your slate clean. And I remember I was like, this can't be real. What, you're just gonna wipe my slate clean? Like, this doesn't happen for anybody. So, that thought took place in about half a second in my head, and I said, send me to jail. I go to jail, and I remember I got out a few days early because there was a friend of my family who was working overtime to get me into a treatment center. And talking with the judge and the jail and everything, and they let me go a few days early, and I got out, and the next day I was on a plane to a treatment center up by Seattle. And I really began to, this was kind of my mindset. It was, this work, I know this works, recovery works, because I'd seen it work in other people's lives, the 12 steps, relationship with God. I didn't know how to do any of it, but I had seen it work in other people's lives, friends of mine who had got sober. And into recovery. And I said, you know what, I'm really going to give this everything. I'm going to give everything I have into this. And if it doesn't work for me, then I'll just go out in a blaze of glory, because I know how to do that. But I'm really going to give it my all. And I had sort of by default just said, you know what, I'm really going to do everything I can to form a relationship with Jesus. He made sense to me. The religious part of it all, I wanted really nothing to do with, which is funny now because I speak in churches and work with churches around the clock almost. But at that point, I was like, I'm never going to any church the rest of my life. But Jesus makes sense to me. And early on, in the recovery programs, they say, a higher power. And I was like, I'm gonna make Jesus my guide, so to speak. And I'm gonna do the 12 steps, and I'm gonna seek Him, and I'm going to do everything I can to form a relationship with Jesus. And I'm gonna give this my all, and I'm gonna see what happens. And I got out of treatment. I was certainly no choir boy in treatment, but I took it serious, and I did participate. Got out, and I packed up everything after getting out, tying up some loose ends back in Utah, and I moved out to San Diego. I relapsed one time. I was kind of taking it seriously, and you can't do that. You can't just kind of do recovery a little bit and then just live how I want. It's really just a recipe for going back to it. I relapsed once for 2 weeks, and then God really began to move in my life in an amazing way. Romans 2:4 says, it's the kindness of God that leads men to repentance. What does that mean? It's God's relentless grace and goodness that brings us to our knees and brings us to change. Yes, there are consequences for our actions. Yes, we get tested and we get disciplined by the Lord. That's a whole message in and of itself. But the bottom line is this: God's intention was to relentlessly love the hell out of me. I mean that as literal as possible. And that is exactly what He did. Every corner I turned, He just loved me more. And it was more grace. When I relapsed for those 2 weeks in California, I found myself in a sober living home in Orange County. It was like, there was more sober cockroaches at that sober living home than there was sober people. That's where my journey, I suppose officially started, was right there. And I was there for a week begging my sister to pay the rent, and she did. She paid it a second week, and she was like, I'm not paying it anymore, but we'll help you again. In the middle of that second week, I get a phone call from a friend there in Southern California that says, hey, me and my boyfriend are going out of town for 2 weeks, and we need someone to house sit and watch our dog. Would you come stay at our house for 2 weeks while we're gone? I have nowhere to go in like 3 days, and God just hooks me up with that. And I remember telling her on the phone, I said, listen, I'm like some days sober, and you want me to come stay in your house that's like 10 minutes from the beach in San Diego for 2 weeks by myself? She said, yeah, I know. You told me, I know. If you get high or drunk while we're gone, then when we get back, you got to go. If you don't, then when we come back, then we can talk about you renting a room here. And I didn't. And they came back and ended up living there for 2 years. And it transformed my life. What they began to show me was what recovery was really about. What is it really like to work on myself, take responsibility for myself, go through the steps? What is it really like to have a relationship with God? That was a new idea to me. Growing up in religion, it wasn't talked about. I never really even heard, like, relationship with God wasn't, when I began to hear about it, it was a whole new concept to me. I was presented with, when I was young, obey the rules, obey the rules and you'll get into heaven. I was presented with, obey the rules and God's not mad at you. Grace, love, relationship with God was never, it was this whole new like revelation to me. I took it very serious. I started getting up every day and reading my Bible and some recovery literature, journaling, praying, went to a morning meeting every day. And I began to just, I took addiction serious. I did anything I needed to do to stay high and drunk at any time, right? And I recognized you apply that same thing, not even the same fervor, just most of it or some of it to recovery. You take it serious and apply that same passion, God's going to transform your life. I've sat there with a gun in my hand. I put the barrel in my mouth before and said, this is it. I attempted suicide in another way, and someone found me and stopped it. God intervened. I overdosed. I took so many drugs so many times, telling myself, like, this is the end right here. And I didn't die, And I know what that's like when you can't get out. I also know that there is a very, very real freedom. And there's a very, very real God that's madly in love with us. He's madly in love with me. He did not want that for my life. And he entered into my life relationally, and I began to get to know him every day. I began to form healthy relationships with people. That was a whole new concept to me. I began to get to know people. I began to go through the steps, take responsibility for my actions. I began to actually learn how to live life. What's it like to have a job and pay my bills? I remember early on in recovery, I was sitting in a meeting one time and I was hearing people talk about their recovery journey. And I heard someone say, they said, now I'm clean, sober, and every month I pay all my bills. This is how disconnected from reality I was at the age of 26. And I said to myself, dude, you liar. Nobody pays all their bill. I don't believe you. I don't believe that. I was so disconnected. I didn't believe it was possible to make all my own money on a monthly basis and cover all my bills. That's how disconnected I was from actually learning how to live in a responsible way. And I sat there and I remember the person, I said, I don't believe you. You're lying just to sound good in here. Like, that's not possible. And there I was some months in doing it. In the midst of learning to do life, and learning what recovery is really about. 12th step in the 12 steps is giving back. Learning to live like this on a daily basis and serve people and give back is it in a nutshell. And I would like to say that I was just such a fantastic person that I took that serious and started helping people. But the truth is this, God just came into my life in such, I went from hating people to now loving people genuinely. Human beings can't just do that on their own. That's the work of God and that's grace. That's the work of God in my life. Human beings can't do that to themselves. God came into my heart and he transformed me from the inside out. And I remember I just became so passionate about helping people. It was so much fun. I'd spend my days off just helping people. I'd go down to the pier in Oceanside, California, San Diego County. and I would just help the people who were struggling. I would take them food when I was done working the job. I was working at the restaurant. I'd pray for them, help them. It wasn't a task to me. I didn't think I was earning brownie points. It was, I know what real hell on earth is like, and I've been set free. You need to know there's a way out. And that passion began to open doors for me. All of a sudden, I'm getting connected to people, and we're speaking at churches. And shortly thereafter, it transformed into now I'm doing trainings at churches. And my desire to want to help people progressed into some years later. A friend of mine who's the founder of a life coach training institute, he said, "Hey man, I think you'd be really good at this." And I was like, "Nah, I'm good. I don't even know what that is. I'm good. I don't want to do that." And God just kept speaking to me about it, getting into this. And I went through the training, and all of a sudden I got my own life coaching business. This all progressed because grace came into my life, and God transformed my life. And then he put a passion in me to help people, which I did for free or paid for myself for all these years. And now it's transforming in my life into a business where I'm helping people all over the world. Shortly thereafter, at one of the trainings we were doing, now this is fast forward, so this is 6 years into my journey now. And we're doing these trainings, and I meet a girl. She comes to one of my trainings, and we meet. And from the day that we met to the day we got married was 2 months. And that is my wife, Mayana, right now, my amazing wife, beautiful Brazilian bride. And we have been married for almost 9 years now from the time of this filming. We've moved all across this country and have 3 amazing young boys, 7, 6, and 2 years old right now. And I'm now 15 years into my journey, just obviously fast forwarding through a lot here. But I came from the place that I just described to you. And now I work with leaders all over the world. I work with churches all over this country and the world. I work with politicians, police officers. I've worked with professional athletes. I don't say any of that to say, look at me and what I'm doing. I say that to say, I was on my deathbed. I was done in life many times. And God in his goodness and his grace crashed in and transformed everything in my life. If he will do it for me, he will do it for anybody. He will do what he can do is so far beyond what we imagine. Ephesians 3:12 says that he can do more than we can ask, think, or imagine according to the power at work within us. When God comes to live on the inside of us, John 14:23 tells us too that he wants to come and make his home in us. And when he comes and lives inside of us and makes his home inside of us, there are no limitations. There's nothing he can't do. There's nothing that he can't empower us to get done, to go from death's doorstep for years to now the life I am living with a beautiful wife who does ministry with me as well, three boys, the friendships that I have, the work that I get to do all across this country. It's all grace. Jesus is amazing. He's transformed my life. He's done it to many, many others. It doesn't matter the place you're in. You ask him to come in and allow him to do what only he can do. He'll blow your mind with how good he is.